honestly feel that meditation and mindfulness changed my life, but also quite literally saved my life.
What if I told you there was a mental fitness practice that can bring you into the present moment so that you can be happier, healthier, and more fulfilled? Today, we're discussing a topic that's become part of our pop culture lexicon, and it's overused, misused, and confused by many. And we're here to demystify this powerful practice. Our guest today, on the surface or under the water, may seem like an unlikely expert on the topic. We're going to take a deep dive and navigate our way to the beach. So let me ask you, what does a retired Navy SEAL commander and mindfulness have in common?
Welcome to the most exciting adventure of your life. Welcome to a new way of living, and welcome to the Five Mountain Adventures podcast. Hi, I'm Casey.
And I'm Andy. And we help people thrive in challenging times. Our goal for 2023 is to help 5,000 people thrive in these challenging times via our podcast and mental fitness one-on-one and small group coaching. You can help us reach our goal by rating and sharing our podcast and following us on Instagram and YouTube.
Help us raise the vibration of our world, moving from anger, fear, and division to courage, understanding, and compassion. It starts with us. And today, we're speaking with Jon Macaskill. He's a retired Navy SEAL commander turned mindfulness teacher. And he's taking what helped him excel in his professional life and heal in his personal life, and is now sharing this with others to help them do the same. Welcome, Jon.
Thanks, Casey. Thank you, Andy. I love that intro. I can tell from that intro, we're going to have a great conversation. I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
Fantastic. We are too. Can't wait to see where this takes us. But we do have a question. We always love to hear what our guests are most curious about right now.
Most curious. I've recently started digging into, I do teach mindfulness and meditation, but I also am getting more and more curious about the physiology behind that and the physiology behind just about everything. And even more specifically, the brain and how the brain controls so much of what we do, the emotions that we feel, the physical feelings that we feel. So I've been doing a lot of listening to Andrew Huberman and his podcast with everything that he does in neuroscience is just absolutely fascinating. And then taking what I listen to and trying to apply it in my life and not just applying it randomly, but checking the metrics that, I wear this Whoop on my wrist for biometrics. And I try to see if what he's putting out there is in fact founded in science. I mean, definitely sounds like it when he speaks, but I wanted to see it for myself. And I do. I see that just about everything that he puts out there, if it's sleep-based, if it's, reduction in caffeine or cold showers or non-sleep deep rest, NSDR, there's so much science to what he's putting out there. And I just love that. And I'm just more and more curious about him and what he's teaching every day.
Oh, that's amazing. Definitely a topic we would love to dive into, but I don't know that we'll have time to go that far right now. But thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Just to jump in for today, we also love hearing, background stories, what got you to where you are today. So if you don't mind, who was Jon Macaskill before the military? What was your journey that led you onto that path?
Yeah, how much time do we have? Let's see. So Jon Macaskill, before I was in the military, I think I was always kind of military minded. I was born in Cape Town, South Africa, and part of a large family, 3 older sisters and a younger brother. And we moved from South Africa when I was 7 to the States. And a couple of the reasons that we moved: one, South Africa was still practicing apartheid, which my family definitely did not believe in. So we wanted to get to America, the land of the free. So we are like the American success story. And then the other side was, at the time, and I'm not sure, they may still practice this, but they still practice the draft for young men. Now, granted, I was only 7, and when I was going to graduate high school there in South Africa, I would have been drafted into the military. So my parents wanted to give me at least the option to not join the military. And then I came over here and exercised the option to join the military. So I voluntarily enlisted in the United States Navy first. But again, prior to that, grew up in Louisiana, went through the schooling system there, and ran track and cross country. And I was part of a very small team, but we were very good at what we did. And we had a great coach. He was like a second dad to us, but we also had like a love-hate relationship with him because he put us through so much pain and agony. But the pain and agony, I think, is what kind of refined us as individuals and refined us as a team. And that, I think, is what kind of inspired me to go into the military. I wanted to do something that was difficult, but I also wanted to do something that scratched the service itch, right? I wanted to serve. And within the military, identifying the military as my next career, if you will. Yeah, high school is not really a career, but as my next goal in life, I knew that I wanted to do something difficult, and that felt like I was really giving a part of myself. And so the military was part of that. And then being part of this small running group that was very good and very tight knit. We did everything together. We ran together. We hung out after school together. We did everything on weekends together, whatever. We were like a tight little brotherhood. So I wanted to be part of a tight knit group that was very elite. So special operations kind of bubbled to the surface. And then taking that pun one step further, the military was great. The special operations was great, but I wanted to do something in or around the water because I'd spent a lot of time. Granted, I grew up in Louisiana, but every summer we would go down to the Gulf Coast and spend a lot of time there. I loved the water. I was a lifeguard, and I was like, you know what, I want to do something in and around the water. So within the special operations bubble, the Navy SEALs bubbled to the surface. Again, the terrible pun, but yeah, so that's what inspired me, and that's kind of who I was prior to the military. And then the military just took that kind of piece of coal and further refined it.
Nice. Something you said just kind of struck me, right? You gravitated towards doing hard things, even, from an early age, high school, and you didn't shy away from it. What compelled you, do you think, to dive into the hard stuff? And the reason why I'm asking is, there's a perception, at least out there today, that we've got a lot of soft kids that don't do hard things.
Right.
And if you take the slogan or the statement, easy makes us weak. I think that you can apply that. And maybe the military is seeing some recruiting struggles right now and having to adjust their standards to kind of meet the kids where they're at today.
Yeah. Well, there's the book, The Comfort Crisis, where we're all experiencing comfort all the time. We live in 72 degrees all the time. My truck has a heated steering wheel, and I drove my van yesterday. I was like, oh my gosh, my steering wheel is so cold. Why is this? And that's kind of how we've gotten because of how society is. And I forget who said it, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher the saying, but it's something to the effect of hard times make hard men, and then easy times make easy men, and it goes on from there. Or sorry, easy make soft men. When I was young, I ended up excelling in school at a young age, and I think that had to do with the desire to be recognized. But then I also, by my peers, but also by my family, my whomever, whether that's right or wrong psychologically, I'm seeing counseling for that, but that's a different topic. But I realized that I could do well if I worked hard, and I started doing that in like first and second grade. To read a lot so that I would excel in I don't know if you guys remember the old Pizza Hut Book It program. Like if you read a certain number of books, you would get a pizza. Like I would read so many books just to get that pizza, and then to get that little star and a pat on the back from my parents and a pat on the back from the teacher. But I realized that hard work paid off. And so coming back to your question, Andy, about when I started doing it, one, it was very early, but two, I saw that the hard work paid off. And then when I took the easy route out, it would actually end up being harder, which is kind of counterintuitive. I mean, we're starting to see that and realize it more now in this day and age. But the easy route always led to a harder life. The harder route led to a more enjoyable, easier, quote unquote, life. So I learned that through that that Pizza Hut promotion. I also learned it through sports. Later on, I played in junior high. I played basketball and baseball and football, and then ran track. And I again saw, when I slacked off on my work, whether it was basketball drills or track sprints or whatever, I saw that I wasn't doing as well. So I saw early on that hard work paid off. And it's still something that I try to do to this day, and something that I try to inspire in my friends, in my family, and my colleagues. That said, I also am aware of what has become kind of like the grind culture. Like, hey, you've got to get up at 4 a.m. and work out, for 5 hours before you get to work and have your first cup of coffee, first cup of 17 cups of coffee. And if you're not going to bed at midnight, then you're lazy. Now, I believe fully in hard work, absolutely. But I also believe that there's a point of diminishing returns, and we need to take care of ourselves in order to excel. So there's the wellness side of things, the meditation that we've talked about, meditation and mindfulness that you've touched on, and I know we're going to talk about more. That is absolutely critical to having peak performance. If you continually grind yourself into the ground, that's where you're going to end up, is in the ground.
I love it. I think Stephen Covey kind of brought it together with the 7 habits, right? Sharpening the saw is,
right.
And to your point, poor sleep or lack of sleep degrades performance, period, right? There's no exception there. So,
right.
Kind of, defaulting to, or prioritizing sleep is a big performance enhancer too. And it's a simple
absolutely
one. So cool.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, really quick, Andy, I love that you mentioned that. I do have trouble sleeping. I'll admit, based on my history in the SEAL teams, I've got some post-traumatic stress, I've got traumatic brain injuries. So I've got less than optimal sleep. Mm-hmm. But I'm going through a program right now, actually, with another handful of SEALs, run by a SEAL who is a former SEAL who is now a sleep scientist. It's called 62 Romeo. And it's really incredible if you practice proper sleep hygiene prior to, if you get off these things, the cell phone, prior to, like, you actually practice a period where you de-stress from the day. And, again, here I am as a mindfulness and meditation teacher, and I sometimes forget to actually de-stress from the day. But coming back to Andrew Huberman, it may have been Andrew Huberman, I forget who it was, but it was somebody on the Joe Rogan show. And he said, the number of people who can continue with less than optimal sleep for like 4 or 5 hours a night for an extended period of time without some type of degradation in performance or mental health. And if you round that up to the nearest whole number, it's exactly zero. Absolutely nobody can continue with this 4 or 5 hour sleep mentality and not experience some type of degradation in performance and mental health. So sleep is absolutely critical to both that peak performance and positive mental health.
I love it. Thank you. So I want to shift back now to the topic of the day, and that's all very important information that we just talked about, right? So I wanted to allow time for that. But I want to build a strong foundation for our listeners here. And I want to start at the beginning. What is mindfulness?
Yeah, no, great question, because like you said in the opening, it's definitely being overused in pop culture and misused. So mindfulness and meditation, quite often you'll hear those two used and they'll be used synonymously, and they are not synonymous. Now, there is definitely some overlap. So if you're listening to this episode, I'm holding up my hands, kind of like the old Venn diagrams that we all studied in school with the circles that were overlapping. Mm-hmm. So if you got meditation in one circle, meditation is a formal practice. That's where you set aside some time to focus on some form of anchor. That anchor could be a mantra. That anchor could be, your breath, like we did right before you hit record. That anchor could be a body scan. That anchor could be anything, but it's something that's going to keep you focused. And if your mind wanders off during the meditation, which it will, absolutely, it's going to happen, you can come back to that anchor. It's like a ship being anchored, right? That ship is going to kind of drift off, but it's always going to be centered on that anchor. Whereas mindfulness is a way of being, a way of living. It is being present in the here and now, and focusing and being aware of the physical experiences, the physical aspects that you're feeling, and the emotional feelings, and doing that without any judgment. And so a lot of people are like, oh, well, mindfulness is like stoicism. Well, I think there's definitely, again, more overlap there, but they're not the same thing. Stoicism is like kind of pushing off your emotions and being just very one emotion, or that's a very simplified term of it, or definition of it. But mindfulness is, hey, you know what? If you're angry, that's okay. You can be angry, be with that emotion, and don't judge yourself. Because a lot of time what happens is maybe we're angry, maybe we're sad, maybe we're frustrated, and we get that feeling, and then we notice that feeling, and then we get angry at the fact that we're angry, and we kind of spiral into this anxiety, and it's a downward spiral that is very tough to get out of. Mindfulness is noticing that you're feeling that, and being okay with it, and being curious with it, and then going through it, and then coming out the other side, because that's really the only way to get out of a particular emotion, get out of pain, get out of anger, get out of sadness, is to go through it. The only way out is through. And if you continually box up these emotions or judge yourself with these emotions, they're going to just come back with vengeance later. So it's better to go through it, experience it, and then come out the other side than it is to box it up. But yeah, that's kind of the difference between meditation and mindfulness. Mindfulness is, again, just being aware in the present moment without any judgment, being here in the now.
Love it. So when do you feel, or when do you think mindfulness came into your life? Was it a learned skill from the teams, or did it come after?
Yeah, ironically, it was learned in the teams, but I didn't realize it until much later. So in the teams, you learn a practice that I'll actually run you guys through later in the conversation. You learn a practice called box breathing. And the reason it's called box is and for you guys who are listening, I'm going to draw a box, but you breathe in for a count of 4. You hold, and that's the edge. That's the first edge of the box. You hold for a count of 4. So that's the top of the box. You breathe out for a count of 4. That's the other edge. And then the bottom of the box is you hold for a count of 4. And then you do that for 4 or 5 rotations or iterations. And I learned that in the SEAL teams on the shooting range. I learned it again right before, going into a kill house, to relax ourselves. We learned it to bring our heart rate down so that we could shoot in between heartbeats, to bring our respiratory rate down so that we could shoot between breaths. It helped us shoot better. It helped us to be more calm in the shoot house, in the kill house. I learned it there, but I didn't call it mindfulness. No, nobody called it meditation. Nobody called it breath work. They just said, hey, let's just do some box breathing to calm us down before we do this exercise. Then fast forward, probably 12 years or so, and I'd battled with survivor guilt from loss of friends on the battlefield. I had battled with anxiety and stress and quite honestly, depression. And I was self-medicating myself, I guess that's self-explanatory, but self-medicating with alcohol and with prescription medications. And I was on a dangerous path, and I ended up in a really dark spot mentally. And so I sought out some counseling, and I mentioned counseling before. I fully believe counseling is very valuable to our mental health. But in this one particular session, I'm sitting down with the counselor, and he looks at me. He's like, okay, I want you to try something. I want you to try mindfulness and meditation. And I looked at him and I'm like, what? No, doc, I've got some real stuff going on up here in my head, and you're telling me to try these woo-woo practices. At least that's what I kind of envisioned in my mind. I was being naive. I was naive. And he's like, well, what if I had a performance enhancing pill that I could give you? It would improve the way that you communicate, the way that you perform personally and professionally, the way that you feel mentally and physically. And I was like, yeah, doc, I mean, I'm special operations. Special operators are always looking for an edge. And that's, whether we're looking for an edge over our buddy or the enemy on the battlefield, we're always looking for an edge. And so he's like, well, it's not a pill. It is mindfulness and meditation. So now he's appealed to the performance enhancing side of me. And I'm like, okay, yeah, well, I'll go try it out. So the very next day, being the type A personality that I am, I went and downloaded the latest meditation app, and I pulled up an hour-long meditation, and I sat down for this hour-long meditation, and I made it about 25 seconds, and my mind was everywhere except on this meditation, and I was frustrated. I went back to the doc, and I was like, yeah, that meditation stuff, it is for the hippies, monks, and weirdos that I thought it was for. It's not for these very high performing individuals. I'm not a person who can meditate. And he's like, so what did you do? And I told him what I did. And he's like, oh, John, yeah, you can't do that. That's like lining up to run a marathon without ever having run a single step before, or going into the weight room and getting under 350 pounds on the bench press without ever having lifted weights before. Not that I've ever been able to lift 350 pounds on the bench press, but I kind of got what he was talking about. Okay. So I was like, okay, so doc, what should I have done? And he's like, well, let me introduce you to this practice called box breathing. I was like, box breathing? Yeah, I've done that before. Yeah. So he's like, yeah, well, take what you learned on the shooting range and apply it in your life. Just do it regularly. So I started doing box breathing, if I was getting frustrated at traffic, or I was, frustrated because of an email that I'd received or whatever. I was just doing it more regularly, not just on the shooting range. And I started to see that it did in fact calm me down. And it changed the way that I viewed this threat, quote unquote, whatever this threat may have been. Again, whether it was traffic, whether email, social media notification, kids crying, whatever. It started to change how I viewed that and how I felt about it and how I responded instead of reacted. And so 8 weeks or so later, I start to feel better. And he's like, hey, John, I think it's time that you could actually come off a lot of the medications that you're on. And I was like, I was anxious about it. And he's like, well, you're anxious, but you've got tools to address that anxiety. So let's deepen your mindfulness and meditation practice. So I started doing longer practices more often, more in-depth practices, not just the box breathing, but some of the other things, other practices that are out there. The body scans, the loving kindness practices, those types of things. And I was able to come off those medications and feel more like my old self. So this sounds a little rehearsed because I do speak about this, but I honestly feel that meditation and mindfulness changed my life, but also quite literally saved my life. And so now I take these practices that I feel are life-changing, but also life-saving, and I want to share it with the world. It's a duty and an obligation to share this. It's like I found this secret over here that nobody else knows about, or very few people, and I'm like, oh my gosh, look inside this box. It's life-saving. Let's share it with the world. So now, now some people are like, what do you do for a living? You teach meditation and mindfulness? I was like, yeah, I know it's a little bit different than what I was doing 10 years ago, but it's the same in that it's still service. I'm helping other people. As a matter of fact, I was driving to work this morning with my daughter, or driving to school with my daughter. She's almost 6, and she says, Daddy, what do you do for a living? And I was like, well, sweetheart, it kind of depends on the day and the time, if what it is I do. And then I said, what do you think I do? And she said, I think you help to make people happy. And I was like, you know what? That's exactly right. That's what I try to do. I try to help people be happy, live happier, healthier, more fulfilling lives. So sorry, that was a really, really drawn out answer to your question. Hope that didn't take too much time.
Oh, no, that was amazing. And I love the fact that, first, the vulnerability of you sharing your story in such a way, an honest way, and just hitting on the topics that are so profound in our society right now, as far as people wanting a pill to take to fix all their problems because, well, they're broken somehow, or they can't control their thoughts or how they're feeling. And I've been down a very similar journey, and I can't reiterate the importance of mindfulness and meditation. Box breathing has changed my life as well and helped me get off a lot of medications. So very similar path in that regard, but the importance of talking about it. And I think the way you shared it was such a beautiful way to really illustrate the power of that. So
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. And I do, before we go on to the next question, I do also want to comment that I believe that the medications that are out there can be helpful at times and given in the right circumstances and context. So I don't want to sound as though I'm completely anti medication if the time and the context is right. So if you're a listener and you hear this, please don't think that I'm saying, hey, you need to drop all your meds. Or if your doc is recommending that you get on some meds, that you listen to Jon, who has, one, I'm not a clinician. Two, I have absolutely no medical experience aside from my time in the SEAL teams, which is combat casualty care. So yeah, I just want to make sure I put that out there so we keep everyone safe.
Yeah, fair enough. I agree.
Totally agree.
And a couple things that came up. I wrote some notes down as you were talking, and I want to thank you for talking about counseling and how you feel about it. Right? It's we spend money for fitness coaches, for performance coaches, for life coaches. You look at perhaps counseling as your emotional coach, right? It's no different, really. It's to help you get through tough times. It's to help you increase your performance and just be a better human being for yourself.
Right.
And the other thing I wanted to just touch on real quickly, and I know what you're talking about, but for our listeners who haven't been in the military, don't know what a kill house is, could you just talk about that a little bit? Yeah, no, it's great.
It sounds pretty gruesome when you hear that term without the context. So I'll come back to that, but I want to address really quickly the mental health side and counseling. The counseling I have felt has been critically important to my maintaining my mental health. And I feel that it is, in this day and age, getting more readily accepted by people, and even more specifically by men. I think men have been a little slow on the pickup on how effective this is. But in my last few years in the military, when I was seeing counseling more often, I was a leader, and I felt that a lot of my subordinates, I hate that term because I feel that we're all on the same team, but those who worked for me, they were not seeking out that mental health. And I felt that it was on me to really promote it. So I had this giant calendar put up behind me to track our work schedule, but really my ulterior motive was to put my mental health appointment on there every week so that my men could see that I was going to see someone. And I had guys come up to me, and they, it's this big, it's written in big red letters and circled. And the guys came up, hey, boss, you okay? Everything okay? I'm like, yeah. Why? And they're like, well, I see you've got mental health appointment on your calendar. And I was like, yeah, well, if I had physical training on there, would you think that I was physically weak? And they're like, well, no, that's what we expect you to do. I was like, well, guess what? I want to maintain my mental fitness, my mental health as well. So I'm going to see someone to talk about X, Y, or Z, or maybe hear some tips or advice on how I could feel better. I'm always looking again to gain that edge. Again, not necessarily competitive edge, but an edge in my own life so that I can feel happier, healthier, more fulfilled in my own skin. And then now to come back to the gruesome sounding kill house, it's really not as gruesome as it sounds. Really, in the SEAL teams, in the military, we do this drill called close quarters battle, close quarters combat, depending on which unit you're from or what era you're from. But you learn how to go into a building and clear a building, whether it's a single room building, multi-floor, multi-story, multi-room building. So it's basically you're just going into the room with a team, into the building with a team, and clearing it, quote unquote. So neutralizing the enemy in that building, and it can be very dynamic. and it can be very stress and anxiety inducing. I remember the first time I went into a kill house, and it was live fire. So it's not just, you're not just shooting blanks, you're not shooting the little fake rounds that we have, the simunitions we call them. We're shooting real bullets. And I knew that the person behind me had a loaded real weapon, and I know that I had a loaded real weapon, and there was potential for either myself to get injured or for me to injure someone else, injure or even kill. We've had SEALs killed in training in the kill houses. There's a lot of anxiety around it. Your heart rate goes through the roof, even though you're not doing anything really that physical. It's just the anxiety around it. So that's why we do the breathing drills prior to, and it's a game changer when you do that breathing. And now, granted, when we're in real combat, you're not going to stop outside the door and be like, hey, let's everybody stop and just do a quick breathing drill and, box breathing. But now you've trained your body to be there at the door in the stack, we call it, when we're all lined up outside a door ready to go into a building. And your body takes it differently. It responds physiologically differently than, the first time you've ever gone into a kill house. So that's what a kill house is. And that's why we do the breathing beforehand. Sorry about using that term.
No, it doesn't bother me. I just wanted to clarify for the folks who haven't been in the military, wouldn't understand what we're talking about here. And that's a perfect example of box breathing and mindfulness, in practice, right? And so if you take that example, now extrapolate that to your current situation, anybody's current situation, right? Where do you find stress? What causes you anxiety? Kick into the box breathing practice that we're going to do in a few minutes here. You can do it before a meeting, perhaps, as a preparation for a call, just wherever anxiety shows up in your life.
When I think about energy and vitality, I think about a kid. They have the energy to play, run around, climb things. That energy that feels like you just can't contain yourself. It's the stuff we've always wished they could just bottle up and sell to us, right? Well, this company's found a way to do just that. Amari's Happy Juice Pack. Mood, motivation, energy, things our bodies can naturally produce when both our guts and our brains are happy and communicating. And we can actually improve that process of communication across the axis of the gut and the brain. This is cutting-edge science. This is game-changing information. This is where science meets soul. This is Amari, and we're helping people feel better naturally. Check out the links in the show notes for discounts and more information.
Right. No, absolutely. I've got a good friend of mine, former Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Jon Macaskill. She was one of the first people to actually start implementing these breathing exercises into her entire organization. She was a 05 commander within the Air Force, Lieutenant Colonel, but commanding an element in the Air Force. And she brought box breathing and breathing exercises into her boardroom, her operations room before they had meetings. Hey, everybody, put your paper down. Let's do some breathing. And initially, people were like, "What is this stuff we're doing? Why are we doing this?" But it changed the focus of people in the meeting. It changed the atmosphere of the meetings, and it really made everybody more focused, more attentive, and more communicative. It really changes the way that we communicate, the way that we see things, quite literally with our eyes, but also figuratively. And then, sorry, I'm going to come back really quick to one of the original questions: what is mindfulness? I wanted to say, why it does what it does, as far as physiologically, some of the science behind it. So, for your listeners, it's not woo like I thought it was. It's actually founded in science. Like, our nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, is divided into two sides: the parasympathetic and the sympathetic side. The sympathetic side is there. It's the fight, flight, or freeze side. It's there to defend us from threats, literally to keep us alive from these life-threatening events. That said, in this day and age, we don't have as many life-threatening events. This system was there to prevent us from being killed by a saber-toothed tiger back when we were ancient cavemen and women. And today, the threats that we perceive, or what we perceive as threats, again, are the traffic, the social media notifications, the new deadline from a boss, maybe a yelling child or a yelling spouse, or us yelling at a spouse. our body perceives that as a threat, and the sympathetic nervous system kicks in to defend us. And that raises our cortisol levels, it raises our stress levels, and it really kills us, maybe in the long run, but it really kills us. So the other side of that system, the parasympathetic, is the rest and digest. And that keeps us calm and keeps us kind of more mellow, in the green, if you will. And that's where we want to live more of our lives. This day and age, again, because of technology and because of other advancements, we're living in the red more often than we are in the green. And we can tap into that green, the parasympathetic rest and digest side of our nervous system, more often by doing some meditation, doing some breath work, because it actually activates that parasympathetic nerve through the vagus nerve. The parasympathetic system through that vagus nerve. That's like the light switch. And what flips that light switch is breath work, is meditation. And you can do that anywhere. When I talk to people like, I don't have time to meditate. Well, okay, if you don't have time to meditate, just practice some mindfulness. Maybe a mindfulness exercise that's nothing more than breath work behind the steering wheel of a car before you fly off the handle with some road rage. And it really, really changes everything. And it comes back to what I was talking about with Janelle. It allows us to tap into not just the different side of the nervous system, but also the other side of the brain. A lot of the time, we're very focused on facts and figures, very objectively focused, and we're not thinking outside of the box, not thinking creatively. As we meditate, as we practice and live mindfully, it actually allows us to tap into the creative side of our brain more often. So we can have more creative solutions to problems. We can have more and better communication with our people about what the problem is. And it actually helps us to get through things more effectively and more efficiently.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you. I love the science side of it, right? It brings it all together.
I need it.
Yeah. Would this be a good time to go into a mindfulness practice?
I would love it. Let me take a sip.
Mm-hmm.
And let's do it. So for you guys and for your audience, get into a position that is both comfortable and safe. Obviously, if you're listening while driving, you don't want to close your eyes. But if you're comfortable and safe to close your eyes, then I invite you to do so. And again, what we're going to do is an exercise called box breathing in for a count of 4, holding for a count of 4, breathing out for a count of 4, holding for a count of 4. And we're going to do that 4 times. So we're going to begin by emptying our lungs. Imagine bringing your navel to your spine. Empty, empty, empty. First breath in for 4. Hold for 4. 3, 2, 1. Out for 4. 3, 2, 1. Hold for 4. 3, 2, 1. That's one box. In for 4. Hold for 4. 3, 2, 1. Out for 4. 3, 2, 1. Hold for 4. 3, 2, 1. That's 2. In for 4. Hold for 4. 3, 2, 1. Out for 4. 3, 2, 1. Hold for 4. 3, 2, 1. And last one. In for 4. Hold for 4. 3, 2, 1. Out for 4. 3, 2, 1. And finally, hold for 4. 3, 2, 1. Now just breathe naturally and start to come back. And on your own time, if you had your eyes closed, start to blink them open. If they were open already, just bring your awareness back into the conversation. And that is box breathing. Simple, something that you can do just about anywhere. You can do it with your eyes open behind your desk without anyone really knowing that you're doing it. You can secretly do some breath work. But it's very powerful to, again, what we're experiencing in our nervous system, what we're experiencing in our mind, what we're experiencing in our physical body. So it's a very powerful practice, as simple as it may seem.
Yeah, just that short practice. My attention's back. I'm more calm, right? I'm not thinking ahead to the next question. What's going on next,
good.
right? Presence is back. Casey, how about you?
Definitely more calm and centered. Mind is
Nice.
a lot more clear. And
Beautiful.
it's just amazing how powerful it is. And I can remember when we first started, my body just physically fighting me doing this.
Right.
Just my mind fighting it. And once I kind of start feeling the results of it, I mean, now we do about 20 minutes a day and it flies by.
Beautiful.
Like 2 seconds, it seems like.
Right.
So it's so amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity. Something that I did when I first got out of the military, I worked for a nonprofit called Veterans Path. And Veterans Path teaches mindfulness and meditation to veterans, and now they've started working with service members as well. But within Veterans Path, I learned this term that I absolutely love. Something that you do or you can do before you do any type of breath work or meditation or mindfulness is take a quote unquote internal selfie. And what that means is you imagine taking a phone and turning it on yourself and taking that picture, but obviously you're not taking a picture of what you physically look like. You're taking a picture of what your nervous system looks like. You're taking a picture of what your mental state looks like. You're taking a picture of what your physical state looks like, as far as not what you look like on the outside, but your muscles. Are they tense? Are you anxious? Is your nervous system shaking? Is your mind like all over the place, scattered? And then after you do a practice, you do this again, quote unquote, internal selfie again, and you look at how your body feels and looks, what it looks like. And then you look at your mind and what it looks like and how it feels. And then you look at your nervous system and what it looks like and how it feels. And, 99 times out of 100, there's going to be a stark difference between that internal selfie before the practice and then internal selfie after the practice. And now I don't work with Veterans Path anymore. Fantastic organization, fully support what they're doing. Love seeing the effect that they're having. But I've definitely taken the internal selfie with me for my practice and for when I teach.
I love that.
Yeah.
Great visual tool there.
It is.
So as we were doing some research for today's episode, we were looking at your website and some of the skill sets that you teach or talk about, grit, resilience, compassion. How can we link mindfulness to developing some of these traits? How does that help us develop traits like that?
Sure. Yeah. So I do a lot of speaking on just those: the grit, resilience, compassion, preparedness. And those are things that I learned in the military, in the SEAL teams, but it's not exclusive to the military or the SEAL teams, and nor are the benefits exclusive to the military or the SEAL teams. So how does mindfulness tie into those? Well, let's look at preparedness first. Preparedness is really just as the word sounds. It is being prepared for the unexpected, and that requires a lot of training. It requires faith in yourself, and mindfulness gives you, as far as the preparedness aspect, it gives you an awareness of what you have in the here and now compared to what you need in the future. Now, here I am talking about mindfulness, and I'm talking about thinking about the future, and that sounds like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth. Now, you can think about the future. That's no problem. I mean, we all need to think about the future in some aspect at some times. But the problem lies in so much of us worry about the future, as far as, am I going to screw up this presentation? Oh my gosh, I'm going on a podcast today. Am I going to screw up what I talk about on the podcast? And being anxious about that, worrying about it. And no amount of worrying is going to positively affect the future. Now, planning for and thinking about the future, that's different. And it actually does, funny enough, take some mindfulness. It takes mindfulness in, again, being aware of what you have in the here and now, as far as capabilities, talents, number of people and their capabilities and talents, the supplies that you have on hand versus what you're going to need in the future. So mindfulness helps with the preparedness. The resilience and grit. So grit is setting goals and sticking to those. In order to set goals and stick to those goals, it takes doing hard work, coming back to the question before, and having effort and discipline. Well, setting aside time to meditate takes effort and discipline. Meditating itself takes effort and discipline. Living mindfully takes effort and discipline. And again, I want to distinguish between those, meditation and mindfulness, even though there's overlap between them and they both benefit one another. But anything that takes effort and discipline is going to improve your grit, your grittiness. And then resilience is getting knocked down and then getting back up. So the way to get back up and stay up or get back up faster in the future is to learn why you got knocked down in the first place. Learn what you did wrong, what you did right, what you could stop doing, what you could do better. Doing that proverbial after action report. That's what we call in the military. Basically, it's a debrief, understanding what went wrong, what went right, etc. As you do that, you're going to become more resilient. Well, in order to do that properly, you have to be mindful. You have to be willing to set aside your ego and say, you know what? I screwed that up. I could have done that better. We could have done that better. You, as a leader, maybe you could point to some folks and be like, hey, you know what? I love you, man, but you could have done that better. So there's mindfulness in the resilience side. And then the compassion, you can't have compassion without being mindful. And a lot of that compassion for other people actually starts with being compassionate to yourself. A lot of the meditations that are out there are, in fact, compassion, self-compassion meditations. They're called loving kindness or meta meditations. And as you do those practices, you start to turn inward and you're like, oh, you know what? I can stop beating myself up. Yes, I know I just talked about saying to myself, hey, I did this wrong. But you can also be like, you know what? I did that wrong, but it's okay. It's human and I can learn from it. And you can give yourself compassion. And then as you start to give yourself compassion, you're going to start to see your people as, in fact, just that, people, and not just objects in your life. And you're going to see them with their own battles, their own problems, and you're going to start having compassion for them. And as you start to have compassion for yourself and for those around you, you're going to start to gel better. So the mindfulness helps you to increase that compassion. And through that compassion, it helps the team.
I love it. So I want to take us maybe back a little bit, but I think it's connected to what you just told us. And again, we, during doing the research for today, you've got something on your website. It was really striking for me. Open up to toughen up.
Yeah.
Trust and leadership through gratitude and vulnerability. And the word vulnerability is not something that I think most guys feel, or they want. They don't accept that, right? It's not a guy thing, especially not somebody who's been in the military.
Right.
So what does that mean?
Yeah, thankfully, Brene Brown is really working to change that for so many people, and her work is just phenomenal, and it's really, I think, affecting humanity as a whole. But yes, being that compassionate person, being vulnerable, and if you haven't heard Brene Brown talk or read any of her books, she talks about vulnerability quite often, and she talks about it as a superpower. She even talks about coming back, Andy, to your point that men just quite often don't understand this. She sits next to this guy on the airplane, and he says, what do you do for a living? And she's like, well, I teach about courage and vulnerability. And he says, oh yeah, two different ends of the spectrum. And she's like, no, vulnerability is on the same side as strength, as courage, because it takes a lot to be vulnerable. A lot of type A personalities, whether they're men or women, struggle being vulnerable and feel that being vulnerable is a weakness. But it takes a lot of effort to be vulnerable. It takes a lot of courage to expose a weakness and admit that you don't have all the answers, to admit that you're not the smartest person in the room. And I feel that as a leader, you have to have the growth mindset or beginner's mindset versus the fixed mindset. You have to admit that you don't know everything. You have to be willing to ask questions. I mean, that's how you as an individual are going to grow. That's how you as a team are going to grow and gel together. I mean, I know plenty of leaders who say, you know what, I screwed that up. And as soon as I hear a leader say that, I instantly am endeared to them. And I'm like, you know what, they're a human being. But when I see a leader that is not going to ask questions, acts as though they're the smartest person in the room, acts as though they've got everything together, they're most often the weakest leaders. And in all honesty, they're the leaders I fear working for. You know, coming back to what I mentioned about my survivor's guilt, I feel, and I certainly won't name names here, but I feel that there were some leaders within the special operations community that had a very fixed mindset and felt that because they had achieved a certain rank, that they knew everything and that they were not going, that they didn't need to ask questions. And I feel that because they had that mindset, people actually died on the battlefield because of that, because of their fear to not be vulnerable. And that's exactly what that is. When you're not vulnerable, that's when you're displaying cowardice. It's the exact opposite. So when you're not being vulnerable, you're actually being, you know, you're wearing this false armor and practicing that false bravado. Again, whether you're man or woman, you're putting yourself, you're putting your unit in danger of, you know, maybe not reaching the quarterly goals, but also potentially, if you're a military leader or a first responder leader, or, you know, a leader of people who are literally putting their lives on the line, you're potentially risking lives by not expressing that vulnerability and being open to learning more and growing more.
You know, I invite leaders of any rank, any position, to sit with that information for just a little while and think on that, because I found that is to be that's 100% true. And it's one of those things that, you know, when I was my first management position, you know, you show up as trying to be the leader, trying to put on that brave face, you know, and you don't know what the hell's going on all the time, right? And
Right.
you're just like, oh my God, you know, but if I don't show up, you know, very stoic and, you know, I'm in charge kind of thing. And it's really not about that. And to your point, the leaders that I respect the most are the ones that can actually say, you know what, I think I got that wrong. Can we talk about that?
Yeah,
You know, can
exactly.
we do a hot wash on that thing? That'd be great. So thank you. And then one other point that I came across, and I think my first reaction was, well, this seems contradictory, but, you know, take care of yourself first. If you don't take care of yourself first, you can't take care of your team. And what I thought was contradictory about that is what we always hear is, you know, mission, team, self operating system.
Right.
And so it seems to be a contradiction to that. Is it though?
So I think the two actually go hand in hand. It's again counterintuitive. So you know, Simon Sinek has the Leaders Eat Last book. When I was at the Naval Academy for school, they would say, hey, you know, eat Marine style, and by eating Marine style meant, hey, the more senior you are at the table, the later you ate. I believe there is value in that, but I believe in the long run, it's not going to work. In a short run, hey, when you need to get something done on maybe a sprint of some sort at work, you have a very tight deadline. Sometimes it does take the leader stepping back from his or her needs and working to support the team's needs, wants. But in the long run, if you continue to do that, it comes back to the grind mentality. You're going to grind yourself into the dirt. And there's that old saying, you know, if you take care of the team's going to take care of you. That's not always the case. A lot of the time, teams are going to just take and take and take. I love my teams, but I've seen them either take and take from me, or take and take from other leaders, and never return that, never give back to take care of the leader. I know just a handful of people who are going to be like, you know what, it's time to take care of our leader. It's, hey, check in with the boss, see how he or she is mentally, physically, emotionally. There are great subordinates like that. There are, but they're not as ubiquitous as one may think. Now flip that. As a leader, if you're not taking care of yourself, you're grinding yourself into the ground, you're not eating right, you're not sleeping right, you're not exercising, you're not meditating, you're going to experience the loss, the degradation of performance. And that's in your own personal performance, but also in your leadership. You're not going to be looking up and out, because that's what leaders are supposed to do, look up and out in the way that you're supposed to. You're not going to see the threats that are coming at you, and that's, literal threats on the battlefield, but also figurative threats that are coming at you in a business world, corporate world, industry. There's threats out there, and if you're not looking up and out as a leader because you're not taking care of yourself, then that threat is going to not only get you, but it's going to get your team. So that's why I believe that, yes, there is absolute value in taking care of your team and putting them first. But eventually you have to put yourself first so that you can be the leader that your team deserves.
Beautiful. And, to kind of wrap this up a little bit, if this seemed disjointed, I want you to think about it again, right? Because I think these things are all connected. The mindfulness, the sleep, the sharpening the saw, the vulnerability, the taking care of yourself first. It doesn't mean that you're selfish. It means you're setting yourself up to be able to help others
Exactly.
more fully, more in a stronger way. So,
exactly.
Jon, thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for that question. I love it.
Nice. I was just going to add on to that too. A central theme that I keep thinking about is being honest with yourself about where you are and
Right.
starting there.
Yes. Yes. As Jon Kabat-Zinn, who is the kind of the founder of mindfulness in the West, wherever you go, there you are. That's what he says. That's what his book is entitled. You can't get away. You can get away from everyone else in this world, but you can't get away from yourself. So you've got to know yourself and be okay with yourself. And then a lot of that starts with mindfulness, and that's as a human being and as a leader. So yes, I love that you tied that in.
Thank you. And thank you so much for the time. I can't believe this hour has gone by so quickly.
It has.
Where can listeners go to find out more about your work and your podcast?
Yeah, sure. So I run a podcast called Men Talking Mindfulness. I have the hat right here. I'm not sure if MTM, Men Talking Mindfulness. It's myself and my co-host. So it's much like this format with normally 3 of us on there. So if you go to mentalkingmindfulness.com, you're going to find that out. And we're on YouTube and all the different social medias and the podcast form or platforms. And then if you just look me up, jonmacaskill.com/links, that'll take you to all the different things that I'm involved with professionally. So Jon, Jon, macaskill.com/links.
Awesome. Fantastic. And we'll have links in the show notes. So
awesome.
It's really easy to find. And we are so grateful for you, the message you're sharing with the world, and your time today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you, Andy. I've really appreciated it. Great conversation.
Yeah, I agree. Our pleasure. Friends, begin practicing mindfulness today to build a strong mental fitness for a healthier, happier, more fulfilling life. See you next episode.